Welcome to episode 1140 of The Sleeper and the Bust. I'm Justin Mason, joined on Sunday, as always, by Jason Collette. Happy Super Bowl Sunday.
Yes, last day of football. Thank God. We have made it. We have made it through the offseason. This is the last weekend without baseball. Next weekend, we have baseball games. So last day of football. Good riddance. Goodbye. And you're hearing this from two Commanders fans who the season usually ends at the second week of the season. But yeah. So Super Bowl Sunday, you got any good? You're cooking anything today, Justin?
Wings. I mean, I just do a crap ton of wings. We'll also have like mozzarella sticks and all that good stuff. But I'm known for my wings. That's what I'll be doing as soon as this episode's over. Is getting those prepped and ready to cook.
Sweet. I am doing some smoked stuffed meatballs. And what else did I decide? Some corn dip. I'll send you the links so you can put them in if people want to see what it was. I mean, it's going to be a little late to try to make it for the Super Bowl unless you get it because budgeting time. Because I thought about doing ribs. I'm going to a neighbor's party. So, but the weather is absolute crap here today. Absolute disgusting. So if I can spend just a little bit of time outdoors on the smoker, I'll be fine. So meatballs it is.
All right. Look forward to seeing that recipe. We've got a Recipes for Success today. Joining us, we have Baseball Money is Fake podcast. That's Ryan, Gilbert, and Blake Meyer. Welcome to the show, guys.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Want to let people know, we'll start with you, Blake. Why don't you let people know where you can reach on social media, and then talk about your podcast a little bit, and then we'll let Ryan talk about something else.
You can find me on Twitter at Balake. You can see it at the bottom of my name at BUHHLOCKAYE. I write for SGPN and Fantasy Pros. Do a lot of baseball stuff on the baseball editor over at SGPN. And yeah, you can catch our podcast on, I think we're on like 22 different streaming platforms. We just made a YouTube. It's at Fake Baseball Money. We got a TikTok now, which I never thought I would say those words, but it is also at Fake Baseball Money. You can find us all over the place. And yeah, I'm just excited to be here talking about some baseball.
And Ryan, why don't you let people know where you're from or where you can be reached, and if you do anything other than that?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at rgilbertsop. Our show Twitter account is at Fake Baseball. Baseball Money is Fake. I am also a part of the Hockey Gambling Podcast on the SGPN network there. Big hockey and baseball fan here. So perfect for me. They overlap pretty much not at all. Just full season, full 12 month out of the year.
Yep. All right. Well, we appreciate you guys coming on and dropping some knowledge. Definitely go give them a follow on the Twitter machines and the TikTok machine. Apparently, I've got a TikTok. I got a TikTok as well. I don't really use it. I keep saying I'm going to one of these.
I use it for cooking. That's where I got these recipes from. That's why if you're watching on video, I'm looking down at my phone so I can send them to you. But yeah, I use TikTok for recipes. It's a really easy way to learn how to cook stuff.
I mean, I waste a lot of time on TikTok, but I haven't made very many videos of my own. So, and then definitely go give their podcast a listen. Today, we're going to talk some news and some notes, and then we're going to talk about some players who are rising in the ADP, some hitters that are rising in the ADP to kind of get you going for your Super Bowl Sunday, though I'm sure most people will be listening to this the day after when all the rest of everybody joins us, diehards that have already been here for quite a while. Let's start with the Diamondbacks signing Andrew Chafin to a contract. Ryan, start with you on this one. Do you think he has a shot at closing in Arizona? Because that's what we really care about.
Yeah, I mean, that's all that really matters for fantasy purposes. And looking, I was kind of surprised when they signed him, but then I looked at the Diamondbacks bullpen. I guess they have Melanson as one of their main guys with experience, and Kevin Ginkel, Joe Mantiply. So, yeah, I definitely could see Chafin in there, especially if there are some left-handed matchups. I know he's been solid in his whole career. And, the Diamondbacks are probably going to be mixing and matching until they find someone that works.
What about you, Blake? Do you think there's a shot he closes?
Yeah, I think there is. I mean, Melanson's getting up there in age. Chafin's been pretty good the last few years, too. I mean, he has a nasty slider. He's got a .085 batting average against last year with a 60% whiff rate. So, he has the stuff to be successful at it. And I think all you really need is the stuff and the opportunity. And there's nobody really fighting him in Arizona for it.
Jason?
any of us could close. I'm legit. Look at they have 5 different dudes as the closer right now. 5 different guys on roster resource, and it's kind of hilarious to look at the bullpen. But if there's a place, if Chafin was holding out for an opportunity to find something like that, this was the place to do it because it was wide open. And I always look at Chafin, and it reminds me of like Todd Jones pitching in a mirror. He's got the same mustache and the hair, but he's lefty. So the opportunities there, and even like another name, because I saw Tim McLeod mention Scott Magoo, along those lines, came over from Japan. Tim mentioned it was a good landing spot because that bullpen's wide open this morning. And so it really is. So, yeah, it could be anybody. This is truly going to be a committee. I don't know if any one guy differentiates himself from the other. But, this is one of those, he landed somewhere. We should adjust where he's been ranked. I mean, I really can't recall Chafin getting drafted outside of a draft champions, and now he's going to get a bump just because he has an opportunity. We can look at it and say, okay, that's better than where he might have been. I mean, even this time last year, we were trying to put him in a closer role in Detroit, and he was getting taken as an in-game pitcher. So maybe that's what happens to him now.
Yeah, I mean, I think he definitely enters the mix. I do still. It's funny. I mean, this signing happened like an hour after Paul and I finished recording the NL relievers or closers preview.
Great time.
Because of course it did. We'll talk about another one here in a minute. But I still think that the job is going to be somewhat tried to be given to Mark Melancon. They signed Melancon to that deal, 2-year deal last year. He was awful. I think they'd like to rehab his value, but they could also kind of do the same thing where they give the job to Chafin and then try to flip him at the deadline. I'd be very, very surprised if like half of these guys in this bullpen come the trade deadline. I assume the Diamondbacks will be better this year, but probably not good enough to make the playoffs. And they'll be looking to sell a lot of these guys at the deadline. So if you're looking for a half season of saves, makes a lot of sense. Take a gamble on one of these guys. The next guy on the docket is David Peralta signing with the Dodgers. We've been talking all offseason long about just how awful this Dodgers outfield kind of shapes up to be with James Outman and Trace Thompson holding spots next to Mookie Betts. Blake, what are your thoughts on Peralta in Los Angeles? Do you think he's going to get 400 plus plate appearances there?
I think he will. I mean, he's one of those guys that's way better against righties than lefties, so they may end up platooning him with who knows who, but he makes solid contact. He had an 8.5% barrel rate last year with a 90.3 mile per hour average exit velo. So he's still got something left in the tank. It's weird thinking that David Peralta was the guy that the Dodgers really went for to start in the outfield this year when like guys like Profar are still out there that are arguably better.
Jason, any interest in David Peralta this year?
This isn't a great landing spot for him just because he's going to be down in the lineup. We know he can't hit lefties and he shouldn't. What was weird is once he left Arizona and came over to Tampa Bay, never hit a home run. So it was a little frustrating in that capacity. Like, oh, hey, come over here. And he just didn't show any pop there. And I don't know what that was all about because certainly the run environment's favored to him. But he's going to be hitting down the lineup and he should be platooned. He can play both left and right field. He's got the arm, obviously, as a guy that came up as a pitcher in that regard. So I'm not crazy about the landing spot between him hitting in the bottom of the order and him getting platooned. It almost just takes him out of mixed league viability for me.
What about you, Ryan?
Yeah, not much to add there. I mean, that's what David Peralta is. He's a platoon guy, classic. But I guess to play devil's advocate of being down in the order, maybe he won't get those late game, tough lefties to face because the Dodgers do have Muncy and Freeman up the order. So if he starts against a righty, maybe he'll play the whole game. But yeah, that Dodgers outfield is just a complete mess. And I don't see him being really fantasy relevant unless you're in a deep league or with 5 outfielders.
Yeah, I mean, I think like drafted hole makes a lot of sense because I think he will probably get around 400 to 450 plate appearances as long as he's healthy. But outside of that, like I don't love these guys in your regular kind of 15-team mixed leagues because, especially if you've got weekly starts or NFBC where you can only switch out like in the half week, it just becomes so hard to, properly utilize them unless they're going up against, 3 righties in a row or something like that. So I tend to kind of stay away from these kind of platoon bats, especially an older one. I mean, he's got to be 35, 36 years old at this point. So I'm probably staying away from Peralta outside of draft champions leagues. But in draft champions, it makes a lot of sense. I also think that they're going to address center field at some point, maybe with a Brian Reynolds trade or something like that. So we'll see if that ends up coming to fruition as well. The other closer, quote unquote closer signing was Michael Fulmer, signs with the Cubs, potentially ruining all my Brandon Hughes shares, which is a huge bummer. However, in the draft I'm currently in, where I have Brandon Hughes, I was able to get Michael Fulmer at like pick 600. So he's still going very, very late. Probably will continue to go fairly late, although I'm sure the ADP will rise quite a bit. Jason, do you think Michael Fulmer has a shot of closing in Chicago?
Another great landing situation, because there are multiple guys that I like in this situation. You got Jeremiah Estrada, whose stuff is probably better than anybody else's in that bullpen, and he's likely to open the season in AAA just because of the depth of the possibilities in the bullpen. But you still have Brad Boxberger. They added Julian Merriweather in the offseason. I'm not going to quit on him until his arm literally falls off, which may be about 1 tendon away from happening at this point. But they already had multiple options. This just adds to the noise with this. So it's at the end, I still want to take my chance with Jeremiah Estrada here, just because the stuff is so good, and I do believe his stuff wins out. That said, Michael Fulmer certainly has shown the ability to do this job when he's had it. Brad Boxberger. There's a lot of guys that have shown the opportunity. So like Arizona, this could be anybody, but I like this talent better than I like Arizona's bullpen situation.
What about you, Blake? Do you like Chafin as a potential kind of dark horse closer right now?
I like Fulmer. He was somebody that hasn't really been on my radar in a while. I mean, he saved like 14 games in 2021, so he does have the ability to close games out. And he has decent stuff. I think he's got 2 pitches with over a 30% whiff rate. So he has the stuff. It's just a matter of how long or how many opportunities he would actually get in Chicago. And I don't know if those are going to be very plentiful, but we'll just have to see how the season shakes out.
What about you, Ryan?
Yeah, I think this is a similar situation that Fulmer had in Detroit, where he had Soto kind of with him as a lefty. He has Hughes there, Boxberger. It's just another Cubs, addition. They signed on these veteran guys, hoping that they pan out, and they got a closing option. So I think, like with the Diamondbacks, they're going to be better. Not good to make the playoffs, like you said, and he could definitely be a trade piece come the deadline.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think this is another kind of one of those potentially flippable assets if the Cubs aren't competing come playoff time or come trade deadline time. I do think he could be given the role, though. So I think he's a guy that you take a late dart throw on. But especially if you're in a draft champions, you draft Brandon Hughes, make sure you get a guy like Michael Fulmer kind of to handcuff in case, because I think these are probably the 2 leading candidates at this point. Yesterday, we had a nice little trade go down. There had been a lot of talk about AJ Puck moving into, or at least competing for a rotation spot in Oakland. And so they're treating him like a starter of this kind of spring and starting to stretch him out. He then gets traded for JJ Bleday, who was kind of blocked off in Miami. So kind of a win-win situation for both teams. Ryan, start with you on this one. What are your thoughts about this trade? Does this make Bleday or AJ Puck more interesting for fantasy this year?
I think it definitely makes Puck more interesting, especially if he stays in the relief role for the Marlins. I mean, he's another good young pitcher they have. They have Sixto Sanchez. They have Jesus Luzardo they picked up. AJ Puck now. They got some guys, project guys, that they're hoping 1 or 2 of them pans out, and maybe they either stick with them long term or just do the classic Marlins thing where they trade them away when they get good. But yeah, I think it's another closer by committee with Floro, Scott, Barnes, a lot of big arms in that pen that have the capability to close. And I think Puck just adds to that. And Bleday, like you said, he was blocked off in Miami, didn't play too much last year. So maybe this gives him more playing time, but he's not really on my radar.
What about you, Blake?
Same. I think it's more enticing for me for AJ Puck, just because I think he could get some meaningful innings there. And I also like that he helps solidify the rest of this. What am I trying to say here? He gives those starters that they have, that excellent rotation that they have, kind of some insurance behind them. So maybe help them with a couple more wins. I mean, that's asking a lot from Miami, but sometimes that's all it takes to take a good starter to a great starter. And so I don't know if he's going to be on my fantasy radar, but I think he does help the rotation a bit.
Jason?
With Puck, maybe he becomes their multi-inning relief guy. So if Oakland thought they could move Puck to the rotation, then possibly they can do something there where Puck can become a multi-inning guy for Miami. He's never shown the health track record or the depth of repertoire to be a successful starter, but in limited usage, perhaps there's some value there. I mean, with Floro, Scott, and Barnes, I thought that's where they were going with their late inning relief. So potentially that's still the case. And they're going to use Puck as that, because right now their long guy is a Rule 5 guy. And that, could go anywhere with that. With Bleday, I mean, I guess it's a good lesson in, I know guys were tripping over themselves to keep this guy and draft this guy. And the layoff from the pandemic, the lost 2020 season certainly hurt him. But maybe this is Miami going a little bit too far with guys that can't make contact. We don't want them anymore. And we talked about this when they made their earlier trade and were moving guys who can't make contact. They're trying to acquire, and they went out and got Luis Arias, and now they're getting rid of another guy who struggled to make contact and moving him off the roster for this. So, in Oakland, Bleday should get all the chance in the world, and that could go either way. If he gets to his true talent level, then it's like, wow, maybe this helps his value. But if he's out there playing every day and striking out even more, because one of the flaws against him has been velocity up and away that he can't get to nor lay off of, and that becomes even more exposed if he's out there playing what should be just about every day in Oakland as they try to figure out what they have. But with Oakland's roster the way it is, this is the kind of guy they should be taking a chance on. They know what they have in Puck, a guy that breaks down all the time. So why not get younger? Why not take the opportunity to get a guy who's already 25? That's the other thing about Bleday. I mean, he's turning 26 sometime this year. So I'd like the trade more for Oakland than I do for Miami. That said, the immediate upside with it, I think that leans towards Miami, but long-term, it could work out well. There's more risk reward in Oakland side than it is Miami side.
Yeah, I mean, this is a nice move for Bleday in terms of playing time, right? Because he was likely going to start the year at AAA. Now he's probably a strong side platoon bat in that Oakland outfield. Still not a great park, potentially, probably a little bit worse of a park, and a much worse team, which is not something you usually say when you leave Miami. So I don't know how much fantasy goodness outside of maybe like a draft champions for Bleday, but it'd be interesting to see him get some regular plate appearances and see if he does belong at the major league level, or if maybe he's more of a AAA or quad A type player. Puck is interesting. I wonder if this is preceding another trade that's gonna happen for like Trevor Rogers. They're now kind of Miami's even more now loaded in the rotation. They'd already traded away Pablo Lopez to kind of open up an extra spot in the rotation. So I do kind of wonder if maybe this is like the move before another move, and maybe we see Trevor Rogers, who they've been shopping all offseason, get moved after the Wednesday 60-man IL deadline that Jason was talking about, maybe off air.
It was off air, but yeah, for those who don't know, this by Wednesday, teams can start moving players to the 60-day IL. So since I'm wearing the Rays hat, I'm talking like Andrew Kittredge and Shane Baz. They can move those guys off the 40 onto the 60, thereby freeing up two spots on the roster. And so other teams have guys like that as well. I'm just pulling those two names because those are two that I've been keenly aware of, as my team has signed one player this winter. So they can move some of these guys to the 60. Then possibly they can go get somebody who's still sitting out there, or make a trade, as you just suggested. To that point, but look for your favorite team to be moving guys off the 40 to the off the 40-man roster to the 60-day IL here sometime during this week.
And so you got to wonder maybe if a trade like a Trevor Rogers trade happens after they're able to put Anthony Bender and Max Meyer, on this 60-day IL and kind of open up some extra spots or something. So I'm not super interested on either of these guys unless we get some more news that kind of gives me some reasons to be hopeful that they're going to have big roles on their new teams, but just something to monitor for you kind of deep league players or for those of you who are in draft champions leagues. Let's move into our regular topic or our kind of main topic, which is hitters moving up the ADP. So what I did was I kind of looked at some recent articles I wrote over on Fangraphs, which is the ADP market report, and kind of picked out some names of some hitters that have been moving up the ADP over the course of pretty much this year. So since the beginning of January or so. And we're going to start with some catchers. We'll start with Danny Jansen, who's moving up the ADP after the Gabriel Moreno trade. And spoiler alert, we'll be talking about Gabriel Moreno next. Jason, I know you were a big Danny Jansen guy last year.
Huge.
Are you interested in him with an increased price this year?
Yeah, not as much, and I don't understand why the needle's moving. Perhaps it's hey, they're changing Rogers Center, but Danny Jansen wasn't hitting cheap home runs, and he also doesn't hit the ball to the opposite field. He's very much pull happy. I was a little bit concerned last year. Like half his home runs heading into last season had come at Camden Yards, and a lot of them come in September, type of thing. But when he hits them, they're not cheapies, and so I don't see how the news of Rogers Center restructuring its outfield dimensions is impacting his value. I still worry about if you love Alejandro Kirk this year, where is Danny Jansen getting all the playing time? Kirk this time last year was a different story. We didn't know how Kirk was going to play out. We thought Moreno was going to be up earlier, but if you really love Kirk and you're projecting a lot of playing time for him, it's likely going to come at the expense of Danny Jansen. So he may not get as much playing time as one would hope. I have him for $7 in my AL 11 team keeper league, and I'm absolutely fine with that price. If he was like $12, I'm not so crazy about it. But it's set at a single digit cost in the AL. He's one of my keepers. I'm keeping him, no problem at all. That said, that so far is the only league I have Danny Jansen in, and I've drafted 3 other leagues.
What about you, Blake? Are you interested in Danny Jansen, the kind of increase in cost?
No, not at all. On my Fantasy Pros rankings, I have him as my number 13 catcher, and that's kind of just where he's going to stay. That's probably as high as I'll put him. I mean, the power was nice, 15 home runs in 72 games. I had a nice 13% barrel rate, but Alejandro Kirk is the man there. And if anybody's going to get their playing time and their AB's cut, it's going to be Jansen. And I don't want a guy that's got a little bit of a question mark, especially at catcher. There's a decent amount of solid catchers that you could take above him. So I don't really see why he's moving up much in the rankings. Nothing's changed.
What about you, Ryan?
Yeah, I've gone back and forth on Jansen over the past few weeks. I do like him. He definitely has the potential and the upside. I think he'll get more, could take some at-bats away. I know they brought in Brandon Belt, but I know Belt last year was broken down a little bit, and there were Giants fans talking about, just should they bench him at this point? So I don't see Belt staying healthy for the full year. And I'm not completely sold on Kirk being the 6th or 7th best catcher. So if I can get Jansen not quite 13th best, but if he falls down to pick 200 or so, I'll definitely snatch him up. But yeah, Jansen, you want to see more opportunity from him, and you're not sure if that's there yet.
Yeah, I mean, I was getting really excited about Danny Jansen, and then they signed Brandon Belt to kind of take away a lot of plate appearances at the designated hitter spot, which is a little bit frustrating. I mean, great for Brandon Belt. Love to see him get a chance to win another ring on a different team. But from a fantasy perspective, it kind of muddies that situation a little bit more than I'm super comfortable with. So while I don't have necessarily a problem taking Jansen at current cost, I haven't ended up with him anywhere. I've either, kind of grabbed my catchers a little bit earlier or grabbed them a little bit later. Just because I worry that he's not going to get to maximize those plate appearances, which will help make him, as valuable as I think he could be. Maybe next year when he's on a new team is the year for the breakout for Danny Jansen, but I don't know that I'm buying it necessarily.
Yeah, I wanted to break. So a couple of weeks ago, we mentioned Jansen, and I made a comment, and somebody corrected me afterwards on Twitter. He's not a free agent until after next season, so he's got 2 more years in Toronto.
Yeah, right.
For some reason, I had it in my head. It was after this season, but in fact, it is after next season. So he's ARB eligible next year. So correct. So I for some reason I had it as this was his last year. I'd heard that somewhere else, and I didn't verify that. So shame on me. And I can't remember who pointed it out on Twitter, but I know they listen. So thank you. But I wanted to bring that up here again, that this is, he's got 2 more years in Toronto if they don't move him before then.
All right. Well, let's talk about the guy that they did move. That was a catcher in Toronto. They moved Gabriel Moreno. Moreno is a top tier kind of catching prospect. Is going to go to Arizona, and he's been vaulting up the ADP since his trade to Arizona. Ryan, any interest in Gabriel Moreno this year?
He definitely has a lot of potential. So in keeper leagues and dynasties, definitely try to scoop him up. But I can see the Diamondbacks definitely trying to ease him in there with Carson Kelly, the veteran back there, probably a better game manager and better defensive catcher. So they're probably want to stick with him. But in the future, Moreno, with that young core they have, Corbin Carroll, McCarthy, Christian Walker's a solid veteran guy. So I don't like him where he's at right now in redraft leagues. I'd rather just wait and take a flyer on one of these veteran catchers that are going to get plate appearances. But if he pops off in spring training, definitely keep an eye on him, because the Diamondbacks could turn to him more than Kelly.
What about you, Blake?
He's not much on my fantasy radar either. I mean, he seems kind of like an Alejandro Kirk light. Like, he's not going to strike out a lot. He doesn't have the walk rate, and he doesn't really hit for a whole lot of power either. I mean, he's got just 27 home runs in 253 career games. But, I mean, he hit 319 last year. So he has the on-base ability. I think he hit like 365, or he had like a 365 on-base percentage, which is nice. He's void of that power that I really look for, especially at the catcher position in fantasy.
Where are you at on Moreno, Jason?
Yeah, I mean, his bat-to-ball skills as a catcher are some of the best in the league already. That's the fun part about him. I think the other fun part about him too is his throwing skills, and he has a top 12 pop time. So you could see him getting a little more playing time with how uncertain the running game, the impact of the changes on the running game is going to be this year. He's the better thrower. He's got like a 1.92, which is elite, whereas Kelly is closer to 2.0. So you could see some games where Moreno will be back there behind the plate. If it's a go-go team on the other side of the diamond there. So I'm curious to see how that plays out. But he's I would agree with everybody else, can hit for average. Everything else is up in the air. But defensively, at least he's a better thrower than Kelly. Kelly may have the better overall package, but that was one of Moreno's calling cards coming up. And that's one of the reasons I was surprised Toronto dealt him, is because he was an elite thrower behind the plate. And I thought Jansen was the guy they would trade. But that's the one they held on to, because I heard of at least one other trade offer that Toronto declined for Jansen, and Moreno was the guy they moved, which is surprising. You don't see a lot of catching prospects get moved like that, but maybe they had the concern about his ability to hit the ball for power consistently and decided to trade the defensive reputation and see how it all plays out.
Yeah, I like Moreno as a deep league catcher that isn't going to hurt you. But I don't think he's going to help you much. Like, he's going to probably hit for a decent average. He could be like Gilbert Ruiz-esque kind of in his rookie season, a guy who gets, 350 plate appearances, puts up a good batting average, but that's about it. And I don't draft a lot of those guys, but if you're in an NL only, it makes a lot of sense, because when you're drafting your C2s, those guys can actively hurt your team. I don't think Moreno will actively hurt you, but outside of draft and hold or NL only, I just don't think he should be on a lot of people's radar for this year. I think long term he's going to be pretty good, but for the short term, I just don't see the massive amount of plate appearances he needs to make that average actually a plus for you.
I would say the name, as you were talking, the name that comes to mind, and I say this, like, he's the non-2019 Christian Vasquez. The ability to hit for average. You take 2019 off the table, and Christian Vasquez has never really hit for power, but a really good thrower, can hit for average. So go look at Christian Vasquez's box score. Just pretend 2019 never happened, and that's a pretty good foundation for what we could expect from Moreno. But yeah, that 2019, you look at that, you're like, how did that ever happen? Oh yeah, the ball. It's like Wade Boggs, 1987. Go back and look at that for you youngsters.
Let's talk about a first baseman in Jose Abreu, who clearly moving up after signing in Houston. But there isn't like a better landing spot that you could find for Jose Abreu's swing. He's going to take advantage of those Crawford boxes. Blake, what are your thoughts on Jose Abreu? Are you taking him at the kind of rising cost?
Oh, yeah. I absolutely love Jose Abreu this season. It hurts to say as a Mariners fan because, not a big Astros guy. But, yeah, hitting in the middle of that lineup with guys like Bregman and Jordan and all those guys around him, the counting stats, he could probably close his eyes and hit 25 home runs and 100 RBIs next year. And I have him as my number 6 first baseman on Fantasy Pros, and I think he's worth every penny this year.
Ryan, where are you at on Jose Abreu?
Yeah, I completely co-sign that. I think he's been drafted way too low so far, and I could see him rising up another round or two even, because right now his ADP is around like 80, 90 there, and I could see him ending up the season not too far behind Goldschmidt and Olsen, who are being drafted 3-4 rounds ahead of him. So absolutely great lineup there, great ballpark for him. He last year he had great Statcast numbers too. His exit velocity was up, expected batting average, slugging, all that stuff. Had 40 doubles. Saw his home runs take a hit, but I think that change in ballpark, he's going to get plenty of pitches to hit in that lineup. So I love Abreu.
Jason?
Okay, you can go to his StatCat page and look at last year's spray chart and then put it over the Crawford boxes. Put it over just the Houston dimensions, and there's a lot of blue dots that are behind the wall.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know how high those balls were hit, but that said, you couldn't ask for a better spot in the lineup, hitting behind Yordan Alvarez and in front of Kyle Tucker. So he's extremely well insulated. I think some of the trickle down effect here is one. How many guys is Yordan Alvarez going to leave on base for him to drive in? That's part of the issue. And then for Kyle Tucker, do we need to look at a hit for his stolen bases? Because Jose Abreu does get on base. And if Jose Abreu is on base, that's going to clog the opportunity for Kyle Tucker to steal a base. So maybe we have to adjust Kyle Tucker's stolen base total a little bit. If we're really high on Abreu and saying that Abreu is going to get on base 35% of the time, most likely he's going to be on base first or second base. If he's sitting there on second, Kyle Tucker's got nowhere to go because Jose Abreu, there's few guys in the league slower than Jose Abreu running in there. So but I do love Jose Abreu. This is the best spot for him to land. He can hit the ball to all fields. If he wants to, he doesn't have to, but he can drive the ball out the right field just as easy as he can do it the left field. Just stay away from the big center field, and he should be just fine in this spot.
I mean, can we start like a change.org petition to move Kyle Tucker to the 2-hole so this doesn't have to be an issue for Kyle Tucker? Because I mean, I still to this day cannot figure out what the hell the Astros are doing, batting him like 5th or 6th in this lineup.
Then taking him to arbitration over $200,000, like really piss him off, right? It's just like I don't understand it either. It's like they have Michael Brantley projected there, and I get it. Michael Brantley, extreme bat to ball skills, works really well for the hit and run, all of that stuff. That said, it's like Kyle Tucker is easily the most talented 6 hitter in baseball. And it's crazy if somebody his talent is just where they have him. But that said, it's great for Jose Abreu for now. And even if they do move him, what's next? Like, okay, then we put Michael Brantley behind him. Fine. I mean, then Michael Brantley's value goes up. You can't really go wrong in this Astros lineup unless you end up rostering Martin Maldonado. That's about the only way you can go wrong with this lineup.
As I just took Martin Maldonado in the 42nd round as my catcher for it.
What a reach there, Justin. Good Lord.
Right. Next guy on the list is a guy who's just absolutely skyrocketed since signing a contract. That's Wil Myers. He's going from San Diego, not the greatest of places to hit, to Cincinnati, one of the greatest places to hit. Ryan, what are your thoughts on Wil Myers in Cincinnati?
Yeah, it completely makes sense that he's rocketing up the charts. I was looking at his expected home runs on Baseball Savant. He has 129 career home runs. If he played his whole career at Cincinnati, he would have 164. So that's 35 more home runs. He was always good as a power guy. He had 17 home runs 2 years ago in 2021. He hit 30 home runs back in 2017. So he has that power. Cincinnati, Blake and I talk about how players should just sign a 1-year deal in Coors or Cincinnati just to get their value up. And maybe that's what Myers is doing here. I definitely think he's going to be much more fantasy relevant this year than he has been in the past.
Blake?
I just wrote an article for SGPN yesterday about 4 guys that I think are going to outperform their ADP this coming season by quite a bit. And Wil Myers is one of the guys that I have on that list. I think he went to arguably the best ballpark he could have gone to help his value. His expected home runs last year was like double what he hit. He's still hitting the fastball really, really well. He hit 322 off of fastballs last year, and he's going to hit in the heart of that lineup. So the meaningful ABs are going to be there. Now, who's going to be on base ahead of him when he's up to bat is going to be a question. But I think he is going to put up a 20 to 25 home run season this coming year and hit 265, and it's going to be a damn good year.
Jason.
So we're only a year removed, and so for those watching video, I'm talking with my hands. We're a year removed from two guys going to Cincinnati, and the exact opposite, right? We were like Tommy Pham and Brandon Drury both landed in Cincinnati last year. People were like, "Ooh, Tommy Pham, the skills should really play out well." Brandon Drury, whatever. Well, that flip that around. Brandon Drury was the guy that was taken in 2 of 321 draft champions drafts last year. 2. And he was a needle mover. And then Tommy Pham just didn't do anything there. He actually did more after being traded to Fenway than he did for the Reds. So it was crazy to see how that played out. That said, I do love Wil Myers landing here. I mean, he should be out there playing every day. I do agree. Like, if you want to revive some of your value, just go play there for a year. It's got to be tough being out of contention about 3 days into the season, but he can go there and hit well. So it's just like this is a great landing spot. That said, it's taking Wil Myers' price from a bargain to not so much of a bargain anymore. Now you got to be a believer. Early on this draft season, it was like he was just freely sitting there. But once he's landed in Cincinnati, his price has steadily moved up, which has taken him out of value. And back to you're paying the market price because everybody believes there's a rebound in store for him this year.
Yeah, Wil Myers started off the draft season. So drafts before the new year, he was at pick 412. Since the New Year's, he is at pick 246. So an almost 200 spot move up in ADP. I wonder though if we're starting to get to the point where he becomes less of a value or much less of a value kind of moving forward. I mean, this is a guy who has had a lot of injury concerns over his career. That Cincinnati lineup is really bad around him. I do like Wil Myers. I think he's fine, but man, I don't know that I could pull the trigger on him as like a top 220 pick. And so I think all the early shares of Wil Myers I got may end up being the only shares of Wil Myers that I get kind of rest of the way, unfortunately, just because I think he's starting to get into that range where he gets a little bit too expensive for his own good. Now going ahead of guys like Miguel Vargas, Spencer Torkelson, DJ LeMahieu, and he's creeping up on guys like Tristan Casas and Josh Taylor. Moving on to the next guy, we have Brice Turang, who he's been moving up in ADP because there's been a lot of talk about him potentially making the opening roster. Unfortunately, the Brewers continue to just kind of block his path with mediocre talent. Jason, where are you at on Brice Turang?
Well, maybe it's a path block, but his next major league plate appearance will be his first one. And so it's not that much. Like when I look at this, like I remember either we talked about it or you and Paul did with somebody. It's like with Brian Anderson, the move with Brian Anderson in Milwaukee. If you like Brian Anderson going to Milwaukee, and I'm in that camp, you got to make room for him somewhere. And one of those moves could possibly be Luis Urias becoming the second baseman. So if you get Brian Anderson at third base, Urias playing second base, then Turang's path is blocked. And I'm fine with that because I like both those guys with that. But it's obviously to see why Turang is moving up the chart because Colton Wong vacated the spot. Turang has a high OBP and stolen base total in the minor leagues, and you could hit him at the bottom of the lineup. And so it's easy to see why people are taking the late dart on him. But that said, again, there's more experienced names, and if Milwaukee thinks they can contend, I don't see them just giving that spot over to a guy with zero major league experience. Those are my thoughts.
Blake, what are your thoughts on Brice Turang?
I want to see how he does in spring and what the Brewers plan to do with him before I really form an opinion. I mean, he's a guy that he hits really well against righties and lefties. He has a decent amount more power against righties than he does lefties, but he hits for a higher average against lefties. So he doesn't really have a weakness in terms of who he's going to face. And he does have that speed. He's got the stolen base ability, but he's not a guy that's going to blow you away with home runs, or anything of that matter. So now that Colton Wong is gone to my Mariners, I do see the potential for him to get some major league appearances, but we'll have to see how that plays out.
Ryan?
Yeah, I'm hoping Anderson takes more of a utility role for them as a maybe not everyday player, but yeah, I like Turang's potential there as kind of a second leadoff hitter in the 9-hole. He can get on, steal some bases. He's seen the pitch clock and these rules before in the minor league, so he's more familiar with that. Maybe they keep him on the roster as a late game pinch runner or someone to pinch hit late in the game as well. And he did have 13 home runs last year, up from 6 the year before in the minors, so maybe there is a little bit of pop there for him to take a flyer on later in the draft.
Yeah, I mean, I think he is a guy you take maybe one of your last picks on in a regular fab league, and then if he doesn't make the opening day roster, you can make a decision whether or not you're going to drop him off your team, pick up someone who is playing, or just try to see how long you can hold on to him. I mean, he had an amazing AAA season last year: 13 home runs, 34 stolen bases, 286 batting average. Obviously, I think at this point he's proven he's too good for AAA and needs some time in the majors. But the Brewers signed or traded for a bunch of just random guys, right? They traded for Abraham Toro in that aforementioned Colton Wong deal and the Jesse Winker deal. They added Owen Miller. They added Josh Van Meter. They've added guys like Brian Anderson, who's already been mentioned. They still have Mike Purcell on this roster. They've got all these pieces. They're not good pieces. They're just pieces. And Milwaukee has been a very cheap organization in the past and may just decide they want to hold down Brice Turang, at least until kind of that extra year service time is gained. So I think if you draft him, you need to know there is a reasonable chance he is not up before May or even up before Memorial Day. So kind of keep that in mind in terms of, are you willing to hold on to this guy for that period of time? But I think there is some pretty nice upside if he does get the kind of full-time role at second base. Moving on to the next guy, we've got Justin Turner, who has moved up quite a bit since signing in Boston. Ryan, what are your thoughts on Justin Turner this year?
Yeah, I like Turner a lot here, especially in Boston. If you look at his overlay, he had a lot of doubles that would have either possibly cleared the Green Monster there or went off for a single or double there. He lost some power last year, going from 27 home runs down to 13, but his doubles went up from 22 to 36. So he still has it. He's getting up there in age, but consistent there, 278 average the past 2 years. It's not a great lineup for him to be in. It's just kind of him endeavors there. But I think he's a good depth second baseman and a guy I may even be comfortable having as my starting second baseman.
What about you, Blake?
I love him in Boston this year. I have him as my 13th ranked third baseman. So, I mean, I don't love him a ton, but I think the Boston move is pretty good for him. He's the kind of guy, he does well in high leverage situations. He hit 302 in high leverage situations last year and hit 339 with men on base. So he's going to probably bat fourth or fifth, and there's going to be chances for him to kind of make some plays there. And he still had the RBIs last year. He had 81. So he's going to get the counting stats you're looking for, and I think he's going to have a solid year. Jason.
This isn't me just hating him because he's a Boston Red Sox, but it's I can't get the Josh Donaldson out of my head here. When Donaldson hit this, Donaldson, when he made his moves, we're like, oh, hey, he's going to do well here. He's going to do well here. And then Donaldson started breaking down, and he had a very similar profile. I mean, Turner is one of the best hitters in baseball on off-speed pitches. He's a great hitter. My feeling is too much is being put into the relocation to Fenway, and I don't see him having. I'm behind Ryan and Blake here, and where he is. It doesn't move the needle for me too much. We're still talking about an aged player. This isn't even just ageism. It's just this Josh Donaldson. I cannot get that out of my head, and we've seen how Donaldson's production has broken down here, and that's what I'm looking at with Turner. The Rays fan of me hopes I'm right. But if I'm wrong, then so be it. I'm not avoiding him, but I'm also not getting into the crowd right now of his value is going up. I need to go pay that market price.
I mean, being in Boston means he's going to DH the majority of his time, which for me means, hey, maybe he can stay on the field for a lot longer, which means we could see, a high in plate appearances, since the last few years where he's kind of struggled to stay on the field. It's not a great landing spot because you're leaving that Dodgers lineup, which was absolutely elite last year, but he's going to hit in the middle. It's not a bad lineup necessarily. It's a good park to hit in. I think Justin Turner is underrated every year. And I feel like I know last year was kind of a down year in power, but he hit like 318 after like the All-Star break or something like that. So dude can still hit the baseball. He's cheap. Third base definitely has some pretty big cliffs that fall off. So I don't mind Justin Turner at all at the current price. The only problem for me is there's a guy going right exactly the same spot as him pretty much. Who has massive upside in Jordan Walker, and I'm probably almost always going to.
I would take Turner. I would take Turner over Jordan Walker's upside.
Why?
Because Turner's done it for a long time. And Walker's got to blaze. He's got to create the path to playing time, and we'll see how we haven't seen Walker. We haven't seen Walker perform against experienced pitchers that can exploit weaknesses yet. That's the issue.
That's fair.
We've seen a lot of Walker in the lower levels of the minors. We've seen him against the mostly pitching of the Arizona Fall League. We haven't seen how Walker can handle himself when guys, we mentioned it earlier with Bleday, when the league found out that he couldn't handle velocity out and away, that's all they gave him. And he struggled to lay off from it. So I want to see how Walker does against pitchers that when that league finds that problem of his, okay, now we're going to exploit that and make him adjust. We haven't seen how that happens yet. The numbers to date have been ungodly, but we also haven't seen him how he adjusts to pitchers, quality pitchers who can command and exploit weaknesses. So that's why I'm a little more reserved. Whereas Turner, we know what he can do.
Mark my words, Jordan Walker is going 150 picks higher this time next month.
I wouldn't doubt he's going to have like 1 week of spring training where he's blowing up against like the 7th, 8th, and 9th pitchers, and everybody's going to be like, wee!
Mm-hmm. He's going to get all the opportunities in the world with so many Cardinals players.
And he's going to get that, was it 2000, whatever the year Albert Pujols came up, 1974? I forget exactly the spring. But if you go back and look at Pujols, Pujols came out of A-ball. And because I remember I was down there at a game at Roger Dean Stadium, and I saw Pujols hit for the first time. I think he was wearing 74, which is where the joke really came from. But he had a rocket. I swear the shortstop jumped up for it and it went off the wall. It was just an absolute cannon shot. And I'll never forget the sound watching and like, wow, that guy's 19 years old. He's hitting the ball like that. I can see Walker getting those comps where, hey, Pujols made it out of camp and Pujols had his success. That said, we have not seen Pujols wasn't 19 either. But we'll see where it goes with Walker.
You heard it here first. Jason Collette says Jordan Walker is the next Pujols.
Yeah, that's how you take that quote.
Moving on to the next guy. I'll let you start on this one, Jason. Andrew Benintendi's been going up a fair amount since signing in Chicago. Any interest in Andrew Benintendi this year?
I want to believe. I mean, last year we were like, okay, get him out of Kansas City. Oh, this should be fun. He'll be able to do that. He'll be able to go to New York, and he was just miserable, absolutely miserable. So, but here in Chicago, he gets another chance. Yeah, the White Sox overpaid for him. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts there. But with his OBP skills, there's a chance he could hit leadoff. I mean, Tim Anderson has done it because he's been, the overall skill set. But you can see those guys potentially flopping in the lineup. As long as Benintendi's hitting high in that Chicago lineup with the talent that's up there, I like it quite a bit, especially if his price comes down. The stolen bases, I want to see where that comes because I know he had his troubles last year in the running game, and I want to see how that plays out overall. But I did like the landing spot. I just hated the contract.
What about you, Blake? Where are you at on Andrew Benintendi?
I'm not a fan this year. For me, he's a very boring player in terms of fantasy. Like, he's going to get you a solid average. And I mean, if you look at last year, that's about all he does. He'll probably score some runs sitting at the top of that White Sox lineup, but outside of that, we haven't seen the power in like 2 years now. He's not really a massive doubles hitter either. So he's going to score runs and hit for an average, and that's about it. So I'm pretty out on him this year.
What about you, Ryan?
Yeah, the only thing potentially that I like about him is the lineup if Robert and Eloy can stay healthy behind him. But there's nothing that excites me about Andrew Benintendi as a fantasy baseball outfielder. Like Blake said, he doesn't have the power really anymore at 17 home runs 2021. The speed is down as well. He gets you average, might get you runs. That's about it. I'd rather take someone many rounds later or just pick someone up off the waiver wire to get those stats. You can always kind of usually find someone if you're in not too deep of a league.
He's kind of a sum of all parts kind of guy as opposed to having that carrying tool in fantasy. But I don't mind guys like that. Like I think where he's going is actually pretty fair. It's he's actually at a decent price around pick 211 since the beginning of the year. Especially because he allows you to stay balanced. So if you've had a balanced draft to that point, and you're looking to kind of continue that balance to give you more options later on in a draft, I think Andrew Benintendi fits the bill. And he has talked about how, like, in Kansas City, because it's such a big perk, he wasn't able to hit for power. And so he kind of tried to just spray the ball around. But now that he's in Chicago, he may try to hit for a little bit more power. Maybe that's him wish casting a little bit because he's never been a massive power guy to begin with. But I think he hits 2 in that lineup, especially because the other guys in the top 4 in that lineup are all right-handed, and they probably want to separate them a little bit at the top. Yeah. But he can rack up a ton of runs. He steals, enough bases. Probably hits for enough home runs to be a really interesting guy that probably returns value just as an accumulator at the top half of that Chicago lineup. So I don't mind Benintendi at all. He's not a guy I'm going out of my way to draft. He's not a massive target for me, but he's also a guy that I'm not going to be upset that I leave my draft with. A guy that is rising a ton since being traded away from Milwaukee is Esteury Ruiz. And it's all because he can steal bases. We don't really know what else he can do, but we know he can steal bases. Blake, what are your thoughts on Esteury Ruiz in Oakland?
He is an interesting one because he had a little bit of power in the minor leagues. He had 16 home runs, but then he also stole like 87 bases in 117 games or something like that, which is absurd. But then he came up to the majors and did nothing outside of look fast. He was in like the 95th percentile for sprint speed, but he couldn't hit his way out of a paper bag. So I need to see. He's another one of those guys I need to see in spring. I need to see what kind of hit tool he has in the spring to see if it can translate against any form of major league pitching. And if it can, I think he gives maybe the highest speed upside you could get in fantasy baseball. But it's just a matter of can he hit well enough to stay in the lineup.
Where are you at on Ruiz there, Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, roster resource has him projected to hit 9th for the A's. I mean, if he shows that he can hit for average like he did in the minors, he hit 285 in his minors career. Last year hit 332. So if that can transfer a little bit, maybe they'll put him 1 or 2 and let him use that speed. And in that case, I would like him as a late round guy to get some speed, get some stolen bases there as someone who just had insane stolen base numbers in the minors. But he's not someone that I'm really too keyed in on.
Jason?
Ruiz's future is really wide open, like a river flowing into the ocean. But his skills are kind of brackish, and I'm now out of estuary puns to use. But in all seriousness, his name is Esteury. Every time I see it, I want to say estuary, and I had to use those 2 puns. But seriously, it's like a great late round speed dart because getting back to Oakland, anything is possible. There's going to be at the end of the season, like if you go look at the ADP for Oakland players, and please hide the women and children when you're looking at the pitchers because it is, oh my Lord, it's bad. Take out the whoever may close, but every other pitcher, it's like you want to leave a draft without a Rockies pitcher. Well, it's like you also want to leave a draft without an Oakland pitcher, and this is somebody who's got AL tout and labor this year. That I have with that, but everything's wide open, and I firmly believe we're going to see some value players, some of the top guys by ADP and where they finish, come out of Oakland because it's so wide open. And this could be one of those guys. If he gets on and just runs, and they're like, we're going to have Ricky Henderson tribute and just get on base and run, it could be a lot of fun with him. But he also has to get on base, and that's that's the struggle with him. But, all puns and jokes aside, this is somebody I'm interested in the late rounds. And I've taken guys like him, Zach Geloff. I've heard Ryan Noda as well. There are some late round names that are intriguing here because the opportunity is wide open.
Yeah. So last night I kind of tweeted out. I was talking about how I'm going to do, this year's Cedric Mullins articles, but I want to do a bunch of other this year's articles. The one I've been thinking about was this year's Aaron Judge, the guy I'm going to fade and is going to completely blow up and have a career season and make me look stupid. And so I asked people hey, what are some good articles that I could do? And someone said this year's John Birdie, and a bunch of people were like, oh, Esteury Ruiz, he is this year's John Birdie.
Yeah.
He's not, because he's going way higher than John Birdie was going last year.
Yes, he is.
And everybody is expecting it. So I'm sure I'll mention him in the article if and when I do that one, but he could steal 30. I think I have him hitting 215 or something like that in my projections and stealing 30 bases.
Man, I gave you two great article topics. I'm a little disappointed you didn't even comment on one of them. I wanted to know this year's Chris Stratton. Longtime listeners will get that. But the other one was who's this sport's Brock Purdy? Who's the guy who goes with the last pick in a draft champion, in an online championship, or I did three. Oh, TGFBI is who's got that has to go with their current ADP is the last pick or later that is actually relevant in fantasy this year. I think you could look at there's some really interesting names outside of pick 750, even in a draft champions.
Wouldn't that just be this year's Brandon Drury, who's only drafted in 2 NFBC leagues last season? And went on to have just an awesome year. Probably will do that. This year's Chris Stratton. That's a fantastic article. I got to figure out how to do that one. Because
just pick somebody from the Arizona bullpen. You'll be good.
Yeah, exactly. So let's finish out with Jesse Winker, who's been rising since being traded to Milwaukee. So a lot of Milwaukee talk so far this episode. I've been unabashed saying I do not like Jesse Winker. I will not roster Jesse Winker on any teams. Blake, you're shaking your head up and down. Yes. So I'm going to start with you on this one. Talk to me about Jesse Winker.
Now, if you can't tell, I am a Mariners fan, and I am so happy that Jesse Winker is gone. Admittedly, when we got him at the beginning of last year, before last year, I was very excited until I realized that the majority of his stats were thanks to Great American Ballpark. I've seen people mention that, new year, no injury, he'll be okay. The injury wasn't something that messed with him for the majority of the year. He had a lot of batted balls early in the year that he hit and he thought he just demolished that were warning track fly balls.
Weather.
Yeah, very stupid weather. And it deflated him a bit, and it just kind of trickled downhill and continued on throughout the season. And I know he had the really high walk rate, but that wasn't. I'm very opinionated on Jesse Winker. It wasn't a good walk rate. He just reached a point where after a while he just refused to swing because he knew that the ball wasn't going to go out even if he made quality contact. So he just didn't want to swing, and then he lucked his way into a bunch of walks, which didn't really help him. I don't want him at all in fantasy this year. I don't think Milwaukee helps him at all. The only good thing he did last year was the double guns that he gave the Angels fans after the brawl.
Ryan, where are you at on Jesse Winker?
Yeah, I don't know if Blake has influenced me here, but yeah, I don't really like him too much either. Looking at his last year numbers in the second half, he only hit I think 195, 185 in September and October. Don't love him going to Milwaukee there. He only had one really great season out of five there in Cincinnati, and he couldn't really stay healthy there. So yeah, Winker is, I'd much rather just take someone later that you can probably get similar output from.
Jason?
Can I go to a different direction here? I mean, when you look at last year, the injuries were a problem, neck and back. And we've talked, often hitters, it's three things. It's your hands, it's your core, it's your legs. And if one of those things falls apart, everything does. And you look at him, his not his average, just his exit velocity went from 90 to 74 to 25 last year. That's not all like, the playing in Safeco certainly impacts, but that has to be some of that injury and his max exit velocity, 91, 89, 62. So some of that's going to come back up there. You could potentially see a Rowdy Tellez. I mean, this is like 90th percentile outcome, like a Rowdy Tellez type of outcome in that ballpark. If they only allow him to face right-handed pitching, when you have the bench they do, he's going to be platooned, and he should be. But that, the plate skills, his ability to get on base, if he can get, out of his head, as Blake talked about, and recover the physical attributes that made him a talent at one point, the possibilities there. But the possibilities for him to continue to the downward trend that he's had there as well, and struggle more with injuries. But there's a possibility of him having like a Tellez type of outcome, not the 30 homers. I don't see that coming out of him, but I could see 20 plus if everything went right for him, which has rarely happened.
Yeah, I'm like I said, I made my thoughts clear. I'm with Ryan and Blake on this one. And I understand, like, a lot of people are like, oh, he's back to being in a better park, but Jesse Winker's just not a very good baseball player. Like, it's just, I think we just need to get kind of our heads wrapped around this. Yes, it's a better park. He should hit for more power, but he's also going to platoon. He's also not a very great defender. He's very injury prone. Like, I don't know why, we go, hey, this guy's moving to a good park. Let's now ignore all the red flags about a guy who's shown who he is at this point in his career. So maybe I eat my words on this one later on, but I'm continuing the Jesse Winker hate bandwagon.
So if we talk a little bit, like over the last month, he's currently the 63rd outfield. So in a 12-team mixed league, he's not even being drafted as a starting outfielder, so he's going on the bench. Names that are going, where he sits right now over the last month, names that are within a round of him include Trey Mancini, Christopher Morel, Austin Hayes, Lane Thomas, and on the fringe of that, Jock Peterson and Austin Meadows on the rebounds. Like those 6 names. Personally, out of those 6, I would take Winker over Morel myself. I would take Mancini over Winker. I would take Winker over Austin Hayes. And I think it's a push with Austin Meadows only because of Meadows essentially missing an entire year and coming off that.
Austin Meadows is the same person as Jesse Winker. Like, no one has ever seen them together because they are the same person.
That's a really good point. Wow. So, same weak arms, same problems. Yeah. Man, that is really good. That's a really, really good comment, Justin.
But like guys going after Winker that I would rather have. Give me Manny Margot. Give me Jake Fraley. Give me teammate Garrett Mitchell.
Give me Nick Gordon. Give me Jorge Soler.
Give me Jared Kelenic, who at least has like some massive upside, to go along with it. Give me Trent Grisham, who we know can't hit necessarily.
Give me Abigail Garcia on a big rebound. I see what you're talking about.
Yeah,
I was looking right around him, but man, there's even more depth behind him.
Yeah, give me all the guys going after Jesse Winker. I'm done. Like I can't do it. So we're gonna end on that amazing note. Ryan and Blake, thank you guys so much for joining us. Why don't you remind, we'll let Ryan start on this one. Remind everybody where you can be reached on social media and then plug all that you do.
Yeah, thanks for having us here. I had a great chat to talk about, guys. Follow our podcast, Baseball Money is Fake, on Twitter @FakeBaseball. Search on any podcast platform. We're there. We have a link tree. We got a YouTube. We got a TikTok now that Blake is managing. I'm not touching that. That's all Blake. And if you're a hockey fan, check out the Hockey Gambling Podcast. I'm on there as well. And you can follow me on Twitter @RGilbertSOP.
And Blake, remind everybody where you reach and if there's anything else you're working on.
You can catch me on Twitter @Buhlockaye, BUHHLOCKAYE. You can check out my writing on sportsgamblingpodcast.com as well as fantasypros.com. I got 3 more articles for them coming between now and the end of the month. You can check my rankings out on Fantasy Pros as well. And just check out the podcast. We have a lot of fun. We've had a lot of great guests on and excited to get the season going.
And Jason, where can you reach? What are you working on?
You can find me at Jason Collette on Mastodon or Twitter, depending which site. I like I'm playing around in both, and enjoying Mastodon more, quite honestly. Because it actually works. That's a crash. So doing that, and then finishing up the bold prediction series with both Western divisions. So working on the AL West right now. And then closing up with the NL West just in time to head on down to the first pitch in West Palm Beach. Yeah, West Palm Beach for spring training the first weekend of March. So, we're recording next week, but that's the final Sunday because the final weekend is Potapalooza.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so just a reminder for listeners, there should be an episode next weekend, but not the final weekend of March, as we have actual spring training baseball to talk about. We have made it through the offseason. Thank God.
Yeah. That's a good reminder that Jason and I will both be traveling to a number of different places over the month of March. Obviously Potapalooza will be live. You can still get raffle tickets Potapalooza if you want to try to get into TGFBI satellite leagues. Those are still available.
There's a Beat Jason Collette League on NFBC now. That draft is the last Monday of February. So what is that? 28th, I think. Monday evening, 7 or 8 o'clock. RotoWire Online Championship. So if you are still holding on to some money, you want to get in there and beat me, which 10 others did last year. See, 2 years ago, I finished second in my own league, or I won my own. No, I finished second. Came down to the final weekend. Last year, finished 11th. I pulled the Justin. I drafted all these injured guys, and I tried his approach because it worked so well for him a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
In all seriousness, it just did not go well. I did win a draft and hold, but I lost my own league pretty badly. So I'm doing it again. So if you are still holding on to some funds, and I think there are still some open spots. I haven't looked to see if it's filled yet, but it's easy money. It's me. I mean, you could come in there and just take my money. But yes, I have that draft on the 27th, I think you said, Justin.
Yeah, 27 Monday the 27th, because mine on the 20th is already full. So if you want to go against me in a league, you'll need to join our Patreon, where starting tomorrow, I'm going to be posting a bunch of listener leagues. So you can do that by joining our Patreon, joining the Discord. All the league stuff will be in the Discord kind of channels. And then I'm writing daily Fangraphs, and I'm going to start this week, or I guess next week, whatever. Starting on Monday, I'm going to be writing for Fantasy Pros this year. So joining Blake over there. I'm going to be dropping a bunch of content here over the course of the next few weeks. So I'm excited about that. Writing my first article tonight for Fantasy Pros on draft and hold strategies. So doing a whole draft and hold kind of primer for those of you interested in jumping in that. That is going to do it for us. For Jason, Ryan, Blake, and myself, thank you for listening. Have a fantastic baseball offseason.
Last day of it.